Good evening. Welcome to MUFON Los Angeles. My name is Steve Murillo. I am the State Section Director for MUFON LA. We have an excellent speaker tonight, Lloyd Pye. When looking at skulls and body bones alleged to be from our pre-human ancestors, many of us find it difficult to reconcile the inherent contradictions. How does one integrate the currently known scientific facts regarding the origins of life and of humans? Evolution? Creation? Intelligent design? Researcher Lloyd Pye supports another theory, intervention. In one of life's most provocative coincidences, Lloyd Pye came into possession of a very unusual 900-year-old skull that has baffled scientists, anthropologists, and medical professionals alike. The skull's morphology suggests one of alien hybrid, human hybrid origin. The mother was normal, but the father was, in all probability, something other than entirely human, according to the DNA. Lloyd will give us an update on his latest evidence and the conclusions that led him to write his newest book, The Starchild Skull, which is available in the back of the room, and I highly encourage you to pick it up and read it. It's called The Starchild Skull, Genetic Enigma, or Human-Alien Hybrid. Would you all please put your hands together and welcome Lloyd Pye.
All right, thank you very much for the introduction there, Steve. I appreciate it. I very much appreciate all of you coming out tonight. I know it's difficult here in LA. You have to fight traffic and all of the above, so I appreciate everybody that made the effort to get here. I made a bigger effort than you did, though. I had to fly in from Florida, but I'm very glad to be here. He mentioned the book, and I'm going to tell you a little bit about that now so that you can be thinking about it. This book copy that you see is the hardback of the new book, The Starchild Skull. Understand that we printed 2,000 copies of that. There are about 500 copies left. There will be no more books like that printed. When the book is reissued, it's going to be an updated and revised. It'll have a different cover. It'll have a different ISBN number. It will be a different book. So, and that will probably not be for a year or more. So these few copies will actually have value in the future as the Starchild proves out. So I would urge you all, if you can't do it tonight, get a copy if you can and order for friends. Just contact me by email. It's a great gift. And it is a book that will cost you $25 now, and it could make you $2,500 in a few years if, assuming the Starchild comes through, it's a collector's item. So keep that in mind, and that is the way it'll be. So this is something worth having. It's not just another book. Okay? That said, I'm going to now run you through, and I know a lot of you have seen me before, and a lot of you know the background, so I'm going to kind of just run through it lightly till we get to the more important things that are relative to the Starchild so that you understand why I believe that it is the Holy Grail of this field. It's always been, we're looking for the Holy Grail. We need to find that piece of evidence that's just overwhelming, that science and government, no one can reject. That is what the Starchild is. That is what the Starchild represents. And that's what will happen in time. What I'm going to tell you tonight is where we stand, what the remaining hurdle is to clear. But basically, for the past 8 years, we've all been looking at the thing we've all been looking for, which is the final ultimate proof of alien existence, not only in the universe, but certainly here on Earth at some point in the past. And as it turns out, the Starchild is about 900 years old, so we know it was there. But all we have to do is, that's the thing about our side. All we have to do is prove one. They've got to shut down everything we throw at them. All we need to do is prove is one. And this is the one. This is the one. All right. Okay, next. Oh, that's right. I'm going to do, I normally say next slide, but I'm going to do it. What do I have to point at? There we go. Okay. This is the Starchild skull at its different angles. You've been seeing it. What I want to tell you is very briefly the background story. Many of you know it, some of you don't. About 1930, a young girl, teenager, 13, 14, 15, she didn't remember how old she was, but she was a teenager, of Mexican heritage, was taken by her parents who had come to the States and had become citizens while she was growing up. So this was her first visit with her siblings back to the home village that the parents had come from. It was about 100 miles southwest of Chihuahua, Mexico, sort of near the Copper Canyon area, sort of like Arizona, the hill country of Arizona, just to kind of get it in your mind. There were mines and mine tunnels, old abandoned mine tunnels from the from the Aztec time rather, and there were caves in the area as well. She was told, along with her siblings, do not go in these areas. They are dangerous. Bad things can happen. We don't do it. It's taboo. Don't do it. Well, you know, teenager, she snuck right off as soon as she could to break the taboo. So in one of the mine tunnels, she said, she noticed a human skeleton lying on its back. Human skeleton lying on its back. As she got closer to it, she noticed there was a mound up dirt beside it. And coming out of that dirt was a hand, what she called a misshapen hand, and that hand was wrapped around the upper arm bone of the human lying on its back. So she saw that it was still loose dirt, so with her own hand she was able to scrape the dirt away, and she exposed the whole second skeleton, which she said was misshapen and smaller than the other one. The other one, we know from the size of the skull, was about 5 feet tall, so we assume the one that was buried was about 4 feet tall. What we're hearing here is a story of somebody, the one lying on its back, which turned out later to be a female. She took the one that turned out to be the Starchild, and it either died in the cave, she killed it, or it died somewhere else and she lugged its body, not in the cave, in the mine tunnel, she lugged its body into the mine tunnel. But however they got there, she buried it and she left that hand sticking out, and then she laid down beside it and wrapped its hand around her arm, and she died. She killed herself, whether by poison or cutting her wrists or whatever. But that's a very dramatic, in its own way, a romantic kind of story. We thought for a long time that it was a mother and child, that it just sounded like that's what a mother would do, but that's not the case. Later we found out through DNA that they were not genetically related. So whether they were friends, lovers, companions, whether she was its caretaker, we don't know. But we do know that it died, or she killed it, buried it, and laid down and died with it. The girl, when she found those two skeletons, she tried to recover, and all this is explained in a lot more detail in the book. But she tried to recover both of the entire skeletons. They were washed away in a flood, and she was able to recover only the two skulls. She took the skulls, smuggled them into the country. Back when 1930, there really wasn't any smuggling. She just wasn't supposed to be where she was, and so she wasn't supposed to have those skulls, but she kept them anyway. So as she grew up, she kept them. She put shellac on them, which was a common preservative in the 30s, and she carried them through for the course of her life. She found out that she was dying of a terminal disease in the early 90s. She asked a pair of her friends, a couple, if they would mind keeping her skulls. Her husband was not comfortable with them. He worked for the government and was uncomfortable with them. Then that couple, he also, of the second couple, he worked for the government. They were not that comfortable with them. They kept them for 5 years, and they developed this friendship with Ray and Melanie Young in El Paso, Texas. And they knew that Melanie had been a neonatal nurse for some number of years and would not be put off by what they thought was a deformed skull. And so they asked Ray and Melanie, would you take these two skulls and keep them? And Melanie said, sure, no problem, bring them over. Well, when they did, and Melanie not only saw the skull but held it, she knew immediately it wasn't a human and it wasn't a deformity, because being in neonatal and knowing a lot about deformity, she knew that that deformity's major highlight is that it's asymmetrical. It's not good looking. It's not well put together. Deformity is ipso facto deformed. So when she saw how well it was put together, how symmetrical it was, number one, this is not a deformity. Number two, as she held it, the weight of it, it was half the weight of normal. It was like a dried gourd instead of a skull. So she looked at Ray and she said, this is not what they think it is. It turned out that Ray and Melanie were members of, if you can believe it, El Paso MUFON. And so they were very knowledgeable about UFOs, grays, things like that. And they believed that it was a gray, that it was the skull of a gray, because it had all the hallmarks. It had as you see, it had the expanded parietals. It had the crease in the back of the head. We'll talk about that. It had weird eyes, and it just didn't look right. So it had enough of the hallmarks to where she felt it might be the skull of a gray. And they decided to get it tested to find out if that was true, and they contacted me. That's how I came to become the Starchild guy. They had regular jobs, they couldn't do it. And I was traveling around promoting everything you know is wrong, and I could. So I said I would. I said, this is a slam dunk. I could see it as well as she could. I said, we'll have this thing wrapped up in about 6 months. And I'm talking to you now 8 years later. It's not easy to get science to pay attention to something that they don't want to pay attention to, that they don't want to be real. Nobody wants major catastrophe to occur to the paradigm on their watch. And so they fight it tooth and nail. So that's the background story. Now what I'm going to do is just go through some of the physical aspects of it so you can see, if you don't know, what we're talking about. What do I have to hit here? You can see that a human being has zygomatic, the zygomatic cheekbones. Zygomatic arches are those things that flare around, that are your cheeks, and your chewing muscles go up underneath them. Notice how a human one is set up. You see that it wraps into the eye socket. You see it wraps around. Notice with the Starchild that it's just clipped off. It's not, you see how it's just a sharp break. It's not the same design through there. So right away you can see some real differences. But the main one is that a human eye socket is about that deep, about 2 inches deep. You can put 2 knuckles of my finger into a normal human eye socket. And as you see in the rear of it, I really need to dig out my little laser light here to make this easier. Sorry, I should have thought to do this earlier. See? You have the optic foramens here, optic nerves, and the opening for the vessels and nerves that control the eyeball. Back in the rear center of the socket. You notice with the Starchild, this is a shallow, about that much, less than an inch, like a scoop out instead of a socket in. It's just like a scoop. You'll see, I have a copy of the skull here, and after the presentation you'll be able to see it and hold it and feel it and have an experience with it, just to see it and hold it. Even though it's a copy, it's a stereolithographic copy, and it's a very good copy. It's exactly the same. And you see here that the optic nerve and the optic foramens are shoved down and to the middle. But as you see, they're symmetrical. It's not deformity, it's genes telling it to do that. I'm really going to get confused now with these 2 gadgets in my, oops. Okay, this is a close-up of the eye sockets, really close. And as you look at them, you really cannot tell. With your eyes, I had them for 6 weeks before it occurred to me to put my fingers in them, because you have the old don't put your don't put your finger in your eye kind of thing. This never occurred. They just looked perfectly smooth to me. But actually, if you run your fingers through them, you find that there's a little dent here, there's a ridge here, a little dent here, little dent here, ridge here, little dent here. See these right here? You can feel subtle convolutions in the bone, and they're perfect. Those little dents are where muscles attach to move an eye. So if that's deformity, how in the world did it come out so perfectly? Barbara, they wanted you to sit over there, I think, some of your buddies. Yeah. Anyway, so the point is, with that degree of symmetry and a fine, fine, fine degree of detail, such that your eyes can't see it, but your fingers are sensitive enough to pick it up, that is not deformity. That is genes telling it to grow that way, and those are not human genes. And you'll hear that as a refrain going through here. This is a side view of it, and you see all the, the normal human parts of a skull. You have the frontal bone, the sphenoid, the temporal, the parietal, pretty much the same, but changed around. Pterygoid plate, you see this brace bone here, you see it's half the size here. What the pterygoid plate does is it holds your face in front of your skull, because all of there's so many important parts right here, including your spine coming up. If you take a real good shot in the grill, you need something to hold it out there, and that's what the pterygoid plate does. But the main point here is just to see how much reduced it is in the Starchild, because the Starchild has a very much smaller face, and you'll see evidence of that on and on, what a reduced, small, tiny little bottom of its face that it has. Oh, and also too, notice, remember we were talking about maybe Mom killed it? Mom had suffered a pretty severe concussion here at one point, and it was healed. So Mom, not Mom, I'm still in the habit of saying that, the lady could have been wacko. Could have been. We don't know. She could have recovered and not had any problem at all. Many of us do. I've got one of those from my football days, so it doesn't make you crazy, but it could be. You never know. All right. This is the rear view. Now this is really important in that you see what a normal occipital bone looks like relative to the parietals, and you see the Starchild, how different it is, how extended upward and flattened it is. And you have the crease, and you see what a normal crown looks like in a normal human skull, and you see this distinctive crease, this distinctive dent. And again, that is not human genes telling it to grow that, because humans don't do that. And very symmetrical as well. But here's one of the keys. Oh, these are called Wormian bones, by the way, these things that fill in here. And this just shows that it's it doesn't look like a child. It looks older based on just that. But the key to this is what's called the inion, this area right here. You see this right here? It's inion, normal human. All of us. Take a moment and do this, because this is really, really important. Yeah. That knot that you have in the back rear of your head. Okay, feel it. That's where your neck connects to your skull bone. There are big muscles attaching there, and that's why it's there as kind of a buttressing bone. Everything has that. Excuse me. We have it. Chimps have it, gorillas have it, monkeys have it, rabbits have it, squirrels have it. Everything has that connection where their neck connects up on their heads, mammals, like that. You with me? That is ubiquitous, except for the Starchild. The Starchild just doesn't have one, and not only does it not have one, it's got a dent, an obvious depression where it should be a lump. And not only that, if you stick your finger inside a human skull, you feel a corollary to that on the inside. Its technical name is the external occipital protuberance, and the inside is the internal occipital protuberance. The Starchild doesn't have one on the inside either. It's missing. Now, if you're going to be a deformity, why are you going to take that out? What's the purpose of that? As neatly as it's done, and not just take it out, not just leave it flat, it's dipped, it's scooped out like there's well, you'll see it. It's a little bit of a dip where there should be that bump. The only thing like it in the world that we know of. Pretty neat, pretty interesting. All right. This is the convolutions that are in the rear of the Starchild. Now, one of the things that you hear, you take it to experts and they say, oh, cradle-boarded hydrocephalic, right? Well, cradle boarding, let's go back and we'll take a look at that. This is true cradle boarding right here. This was a cradle-boarded human being. This is not. Let's talk about cradle boarding for a minute because it's important to just get rid of that. In primitive cultures, when women have children and they need to work all the time, they can't carry the baby around and do what they have to do. The baby's got to be strapped or slung or in some way fixed so it's out of the way while the woman can work when the baby's sleeping or not feeding or whatever. In most cultures, they tie them to boards because they can just strap them on the back and go to work and they're okay. The one thing you have to do though, because an infant is an infant, is tie its head down because its head is one of the biggest parts of its body at that point and its neck is very weak. So they tie the head down against the board, and in doing that, the soft bone of the head flattens to take the shape of the bone so that it becomes as flat as the board. If you feel the back of the human's head, it is as flat as this desk right here. As flat as a piece of glass. Flat. Absolutely flat, but it's about the size of the palm of your hand. It never extends past the inion. The inion is always there. It never flattens the inion. Why? Because that's where the neck is. You'd have to rip the neck muscles out to get to flatten the inion. The inion is always there. Okay? So, that's it. Starchild from top right down to the neck is flattened, but its convolutions are still there. It was not cradle boarded because the convolutions wouldn't be there. If they were, it would just be flat, flat, flat. But as you see, the convolutions are clearly there. It was not cradle boarded. Clear. Evidence is clear. I can still take it to scientists and they will say, oh, it's cradle boarded hydrocephalic. And I say, well, let me show you why it's not. And they say, let me show you the door. They don't want to hear it. Okay. Doing it right. I'm going backwards. Oh, sorry. I'm not used to doing this. All right. The top, you see, now you really get a good shot at that creased dent. The shine you see is from the shellac that she put on them. Very good thing that she did because it kept, I let so many people handle it in that year that I had it before we put it away. The oils of human hands would have gone in, but they didn't. It's very, all you have to do is scrape that off and it's pristine bone under there. So it was a very good thing that she did that. Okay, here you see an underside view, and you notice great dentition on the human being, and you see the zygomatic arch here fully, and you get kind of a sense of how small this would be. You'll see in a minute. The main thing is this right here is called the basilar part. You see this piece of bone? That is missing in the Starchild. This bone doesn't fuse in a normal human being till about the age of 20. So we can maybe assume based on that the Starchild was less than the age of 20 when it died. These parts are, this is the mastoid bone, mastoid, mastoid, mastoid. That's your part behind your ear. That's the ear in here, ear in here. This is the base of the cheekbone going up. See that? There, connecting. Oops, there. Anyway, so these are just the underside parts of the two, so you get a sense of how different they are, how much bigger the neck is of the human, and you're going to see that in... Dadgummit. Oops. There we go. See the difference? Zygomatics. I can get 2 fingers up through here. Where 2 of my fingers go. That's where your chewing muscles come up and wrap up around your head, which we'll talk about in a minute. You get about 2 fat soda straws through here. Very, very different, much reduced down face. Boy, I'm going to get this, folks. I'm telling you, I'm going to figure this out. Should let somebody else do it, probably. Okay, this is looking at the parts we were talking about, the base of the cheekbone, the occipital, this is the occipital condyle. This is where your neck, when your spine comes in, it's what it rotates on. These two bones right here, these are gone now for testing purposes. Ear hole, ear. Just making you familiar with it. This is the neck of this is where human neck fits. This is where a Starchild neck fits. You see what a completely different, reduced and centered up neck it has. Completely different design for the Starchild. Here's the absent inion we were talking about. This is where the Starchild's neck muscles connect. That's the opening for the spine right there. So it's very close, and it's a very small neck as opposed to the human with the neck opening right here. And look where it's the two big muscles and the inion are for it. So it gives you a clear difference. Inion, inion. Neck muscle attachment, neck muscle attachment. See the difference? Huge, huge difference. Balance point, very important. Human beings, the front of our faces are pretty much hollow. We have those deep eye sockets, we have heavy frontal sinuses up here, we have our nasal passages, we have our mouths. We're very light up here. So it's, you know, like a heavy kid and a light kid on a seesaw. You've got to balance them off to make it work. So our center point is rear of center to get more of our skulls to the left to balance out. More to here. But that's where our spines come in right there. With the Starchild, you notice it's just perfect. It's balanced completely because it's got much less up front. It's got much less eye socket, has no frontal sinuses, which we'll see, small nose, small mouth, tiny, and a lot more brain. This is really interesting. Pay attention to this. As we sit in this room here, the average size of our brain is 1,400 cubic centimeters. 1,400 cubic centimeters. Average person, that's the size of your brain. Small person, about a 5-foot tall person, about the size of this person, about 1,200 cubic centimeters. 1,200 cubic centimeters. So, and that is indeed what that skull contains. 1,200 cubic centimeters of brain tested, measured. The Starchild is exactly the same size as that skull. They cubically are the same size. But guess what? This skull holds, miraculously, 1,600 cubic centimeters of brain. 1,200 cubic centimeters of brain. 14 is the norm of us sitting here in this room right here. 1,200, 1,400, 1,600. Fully 1/3 more brain in this skull. 1/3 more. 400 more cubic centimeters than ought to be there. That's an awful lot of extra brain. What for? What for? We don't know. But we do know this. This is really amazing. Down here in all of us is our cerebellum. It's about this size, about this position, cerebellum, about the size of your fist. Okay? That is your motor system. Even though all this is brain, no question about it, this runs the show. Runs the show. Your eyeball, your optic nerve from your eye, the thing that gives you vision, the miracle of vision, the incredible thing, power of vision, is run by an optic nerve that has about 1 million neurons in it. About 1 million neurons in it. This is basically 10% of the human brain. 10% of the human brain. It holds 200 million neurons. 200 million neurons. Optic nerve 1 million, 200 million. This is you. This is what runs your motor. Anything happens to this, you are toast. That's why you have that big, thick occipital bone back there, thickest part of your skull, wraps around it, and it sits in it like a hand. It's curved around, and it just sits there, and inside you have a bracing, buttressing flanges of bone to hold it up, because it's got to sit there with this 3 pounds weighing down on it for the course of your life. It has to hold its integrity against that weight, which it does because, again, it has that those buttressing flanges of bone in there. And it has that curved position. It's designed right for us. This is not designed well for the Starchild, because the Starchild has this angle, this steep angle right down into the neck. So you see it's squeezed up into this shape, assuming it's in there, and it's got all of this extra weight pressing down on it, pressing it right down out the neck hole. I mean, right out the neck hole. And when you have a problem here, when like hydrocephaly or anything like that is causing extra pressure, this gets squeezed right out the neck hole in a child, because again, the bone is so soft. You can see where it opens up, and you'll get pieces of it squeezing out. But with the Starchild, the whole thing is just being pressed down and out of its neck hole. You would think it would be all spread out, but you've already seen pictures. It's not at all. It's perfect. It's perfectly normal. First brain got to see this and figure it out. He said, you know, this thing probably doesn't have a cerebellum like we have a cerebellum, or if it is, it's made out of something else. It can't be like ours, because ours would just go squeezing out like toothpaste with that kind of pressure bearing down on it at that angle. Because why? No flanges. No buttressing flanges to hold it up, to keep it in place. It's a straight shoot. It's like a slipper slide down and out. And yet it doesn't come out. It's just incredible. Should not be there, but is. Okay, chewing muscles. You can see from the difference in the texture of the bone, if you look carefully on the real ones, you can see it very clearly. That's where the chewing muscles are attached. Starchild's chewing muscles, very much reduced. Now, you have to ask yourself, again, deformity. How does it know? You know, it's like the old thing with the thermos bottle, when you teach kids about a thermos bottle, and you say, well, a thermos can keep something cold, or it can keep something hot, and the kid will invariably say, well, how does it know what it's supposed to do, you know? Well, how did it know to reduce the face to match the chewing muscles? Or did it reduce the chewing muscles first and then the face? They work in conjunction. If it's a deformity, how did it know? Which came first? Just another one of those reasons why it's not a deformity. This is the surface of the bone of a normal human, and you see these little, they're called lacunae, and the bone regenerates itself through these. It's hard to explain how they work, but they're amazing, but they do work, and they're like that. Starchild missing. 1 for every 100 of these, you'll find one here. Now, if you're a deformity, why that? Why would that go? Why would that go? Another one. Okay, this is the little piece of maxilla that was found with the Starchild. So we've got a couple of its teeth. We've got to look at it. That's a nasal passage right there. So we know that it had at least a nasal passage, if not a nose, the way ours looks. And this is about where it would fit. It's very small. It's only about 1 inch. That's my thumb, so you can see how small it is. It's only about 1 inch, so it's a very small lower face. And this, they took, at a dental lab, they took that piece and they expanded a little on it, as you can see. And they just sort of extrapolated, did the best they could, using a human template. That's all they had, so they built a human lower face to kind of go with it, so we'd have something to set up against it. But it's too big. It's just way too big. But they don't know how to make an alien. They don't have the templates for that. They just did the best that they could. Okay, this is a close-up look at it, at the little piece of maxilla and at the teeth. This is some molding stuff that was left on it. This tooth is now gone to testing, unfortunately, to no good effect. But nonetheless, they told me it had to be done. But as you see, these are well-worn teeth. These are not baby teeth. At first, we thought, because there are other teeth up in here, as you'll see when you see the x-rays in a moment, The first thing they told me was it's a child. You know, if you got teeth up here, you got teeth down and teeth up, that's a child. Ipso facto, that's a child. So that's why we called it the Starchild. But later, people began to look at it really carefully, and they began to realize, wait a minute, children don't have time to get their teeth in that shape. That's adults. That's adult teeth that look like, they're tiny, look like child teeth, but they're adult teeth. And more evidence of that became clear later. Okay, as you see here, this is the ground off teeth of the adult. This was a woman who was eating corn fixed on a grinding stone where there's a lot of grit in it, because her teeth are just like sanded off pretty much, you see. But great dentition, by the way, no cavities, no problems, like she had braces, really. This is the Starchild tooth in close-up, and you see how worn it is, chipped. It's got pitting on it here and other places, and you see this crazing, these lines here. These are called crazing lines. The clear ones are post-mortem contraction. The ones with color to them were in life, and that comes from real strenuous wear on your teeth. And it's hard to imagine a child being able to create the torque that would crack the enamel of the teeth like that. So the idea that it's a child at death is no longer valid. What I say now is it could have been anywhere from 5 years old to 500 years old. We don't know. It could have very easily have cycled teeth down as it needed them. If it had a 500-year lifespan, it'd go through 3, 4, 5, 6 sets of teeth. Like a shark, it could just make them. We don't know that it couldn't do that. We don't know that it did do that. But it's a possibility. This is the x-ray, so you can see this is the first x-ray, and this was later in London, a few years later. You got a much better look at it. This is when the second tooth was gone, but we still had this one. So you can see, there's no question, their teeth waiting to come down. Now, this is the tooth that came out. This is this tooth out. Not a baby tooth. You see the depth and the thickness of the roots. Baby teeth, as you know, if you had children, you know how it is. They come out and they don't have roots. They just come out. The roots dissolve. Roots in a baby tooth dissolve into making more teeth, the teeth that are going to replace them. So it wasn't a child. Pretty much it wasn't a child. All right, this is an x-ray, and we see the frontal sinus. This part right here, that's the eye socket, but that's the sinuses. And as you see with the Starchild, which are a very different kind of eye socket, no frontal sinus at all, not even vestigial nubs. That is very, 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 very unusual. To not have anything. To have small, to have reduced is not, you can have that. To have not even a flicker of frontal sinus is very unusual. Again, its genes told it to grow that way, and that's not human genes. Side view, and you see very clearly here the smoothness of the cradle boarding right down to the inion, just what I said, and you see here the convolutions showing that the Starchild wasn't. We also see the veins that show that the brain was pressing fully up against the skull, leaving the imprints of the veins, very normal, and the same thing with the Starchild, telling you it was not a hydrocephalic, not water on the brain. Now, you could argue that, well, maybe there was something water in the brain, but not really, because if it was water in the brain of any kind, creating any kind of pressure whatsoever, then that crease would not be in the crown, because the pressure would not know to press just here but not here. You with me? I mean, to argue, to make the statement that this is a cradle-boarded hydrocephalic is a moronic statement, and I've heard that more from scientists than from anything else. A moron can look at that crease and know that no hydrocephalic pressure created that skull. I would just want to punch them when they say that. I really do. You can tell how it annoys me. Okay, neck. You're looking at the downside of it, and you see the neck, and you see, really, I just have this here so you can see that, again, there's no difference, no pressure from inside. The cerebellum didn't distend it at all. It's a different brain than we have. The evidence is clear. This is the CAT scan results, and a CAT scan is just a series of basically electronic slices through the bone, and you see the pictures. This is the start of it at the top, and you just go right through in this series of shots. And you see these openings right here. What that's telling you is the sutures are open the whole way. So it's basically just a healthy being, whatever it was. It didn't have any premature suturing whatsoever to create the deformity. But, but one thing that's important to notice is its inner ears. When the guy looked at this that did it, he says, man, look at those inner ears. About twice the size they ought to be. Now, why would it have much bigger inner ears? Well, it's got an unusual balance to its head, and it's got a big head and a big heavy brain in there on a little thin spindly neck. Maybe it needed a little extra balancing for that. For whatever reason, your inner ear is a balancing mechanism. It has bigger inner ears. Okay, now we're to the, in fact, let me back up and talk to you a minute before we bring that up. Oops, sorry. Yeah, this is the one we should have had. There you go. I thought something was wrong. Okay, we got to make the first DNA test. This was going to be done at a lab in Canada. They were a forensic lab. They were not capable and not prepared to do ancient DNA, and you need to start understanding DNA now. If we go right now and we want to check on a murder case or a paternity suit or anything like that, we just take normal DNA, take it and run it. It's $200–300, no problem, because everything's there and it's live and it's not hard to recover it. Anything older than 50 years is considered ancient DNA, and that becomes very difficult to recover cleanly and get the results that you want. It requires much, much more care. And so this lab was a forensic lab for murder, for paternity. They were not prepared, but we could not, at that time there were only about 6 in the world. This is 1999. There were only about 6 in the world that would do and could do ancient DNA, and none of them would have anything to do with the Starchild. So this lab in Canada said, well, we'll give it a shot. It was in a mine tunnel. It shouldn't be too degraded. Maybe we can get a recovery. Well, they really had a lot of trouble. They had a couple of contaminations, and they finally got a result, and you see what they wrote. After the customary number of PCR cycles, 28, there was a very weak 200 picograms gender profile from the second bone sample, Starchild, taken from the child's mastoid process. Only one locus showed a profile, amylogenin. The result is XY, which tells us 2 significant things. First, the child was male. Second, the DNA is human. 1,000 picograms are usually the minimum threshold. This guy basically in Canada just wanted this out of his office because he was having so much trouble with it. So he insisted that I announce that it was a human, and that was that. Well, that was a disaster because support just dried up. And it was 3 years before I got another person involved willing to give me the money to do what I needed to do. It was a 3-year mistake, and this is totally wrong. Totally wrong. This is just people trying to CYA as much as they can. Big mistake. So in 3 years we were ready to get another test. We had some money. A lady from England, Belinda McKenzie, stepped up and said, I want to know the answer to this. Do what you need to do, and I'll take care of it. So and by then, 4 years later, there were a number of more labs able to do ancient DNA, and I found one in California and up in the San Francisco Bay Area. And they agreed to do 2 young guys starting out, Rip and Molly and Jason Eshelman, and they agreed to do it. So we got with them and we cut the bone, and boy, I can remember the guys from Canada saying to me, but it didn't register. They said, boy, that bone is a lot harder than normal. But it didn't register. I had nothing to compare it to. I was there for the cutting of the second one. And when, you know what a Dremel blade is? It looks like a flashlight with a circular disc on the end of it that spins around. That's what they cut the samples with. So they did the human bone first, in human skull, and they took the Dremel blade, and the guy just went, cut 4 and cut a square out, and that was it. Just, cut it and cut it into 4s, and not a problem. Little powdery, blown up powder, a little funny smell of burning collagen, because that's what your bone is. With that smell when they drill your teeth in a dentist's office, that is burning collagen. It's kind of not pleasant, but you know, you could live with that. Come time to do the Starchild, put the Dremel blade down on it, and went boop, and it bounced the blade off. And he was like, whoa. So he went like, really had to press really hard to make it get through. And once it bit through, it cut through. But man, it sent out a cloud of powder, and it stunk to high heaven. We were just gagging. It was such a powerful stink of burning collagen. And he said, I've never seen anything like this. This is unreal. It's so hard. And it was half as thick and twice or more hard to cut through. Very strange. And then cut it into pieces and began to do the testing. When they do the testing, the DNA, they put it into a chemical to dissolve the bone down to, you know, its elements, basically turn it into a liquid. And you can read about all this, the details in the book, but basically they put the human bone in that EDTA, the solution, and it takes about a week in a rocker, just rocking back and forth in EDTA. It dissolves it in a week. Starchild didn't change after a month, after 2 months, after 6 months. But they didn't wait 6 months. They just, you know, they left a piece doing it, but they took another piece and put a very strong dissolving agent, detergent on it, and did dissolve it, and were able to test it. But it just goes to show you again, not human, not human. So when they tested it, remember that we had the carbon-14 date done on the two skulls, 2 separate labs, 2 separate occasions, and both returned the same date, 900 years plus or minus 40 years. So the story is told by the woman is probably true. They died together about 900 years ago. No question of that. So when it came time to do the DNA, they said, well, we assume we're going to get a good recovery here because they were buried in a mine tunnel. There shouldn't have been a lot of degradation. The usual degradation that you have shouldn't have that. Should be a good recovery. Even though the Canada lab had a really hard time, they were contaminating because they weren't prepared to do ancient DNA. These guys were prepared. These guys, in fact, had worked on the Kennewick Man, if you know who the Kennewick Man was. They were unable to recover anything from there because it was exposed out in the open, the sun, the water, and everything, and it was degraded to the point of no recovery. But they said, we think we'll get something here if it was indeed in a mine tunnel. Well, sure enough, the mitochondrial DNA came up beautifully. Now, let me explain the difference. There's 2 kinds of DNA that you have. There's mitochondrial DNA, which comes from your mother, and there's nuclear DNA that comes from your mother and your father. All right? Mitochondrial DNA from your mother, nuclear DNA from mother and father. Mitochondrial DNA floats in little chips outside the nucleus. The nucleus of the cell contains your whole genome, so that's mother and father. The little chips floating outside come from mother, down from mother. Okay, so they did the mitochondrial DNA, and as you can see, excuse me, this is how it works. There's a control. The geneticist himself puts his own DNA in every sample so that they can make sure that the gel sheet, this is called the gel sheet, is working, so you know that you have a live gel sheet. So this is the mitochondrial DNA of the adult female, and she is what's called haplogroup A, meaning typical Native American of Mesoamerican extraction, meaning Mexican. Nothing unusual about it at all. This is the Starchild's mitochondrial DNA. You see a completely different pattern, haplogroup C, another type of Native American. Nothing unusual about it, but a little rarer than haplogroup A. It just means they weren't mother and child. But this adult's mother was a human being, and the Starchild's mother was a human being. But notice how clear, how nice and clear they are in the gels. That's a fresh sample of Jason's DNA right there. Look how, so very nice recovery. No problem at all. So now we're up for the money shot, which is the nuclear DNA. This is going to tell the tale. This will tell the tale because we're going to recover both the mother and the father's DNA, right? Again, Jason's control, and this is the adult's DNA, and we see that she's a perfectly normal human with her own array. Everybody's different. And that's her, no question. But we see with the Starchild, these little things here, by the way, these little off to the sides are called primer dimer. And that's another thing that shows that the gel sheet is working. 6 attempts, no recovery, except for the little primer dimer dings. See it? Now, what does that mean? Dad is not a human. We know mom is, and we know we've got nice clear recoveries, so there's no degradation. There should have been a recovery if dad was human. Recovery meaning that they send in what are called primers, which are stretches of base pairs. In a normal human, you have your chromosome is made up of the smallest parts of it are called base pairs. There are 3 billion base pairs. They combine themselves into about 20 to 30,000 genes, and those genes combine themselves into 46 chromosomes for humans. 23 from mom, 23 from dad. Okay, you with me on that? It's okay. Base pairs to genes to chromosomes. Base pairs are the smallest unit. So what they do is they take strings of base pairs from 100 to a few thousand long to make like keys to go into unknown samples. And that key goes in, and when it finds a lock that fits it, when it matches up, you know what it is. You can put a sample there of any kind of DNA, and you can put human in, chimp in, gorilla in, rabbit in, squirrel in, whatever you want. When you get the right one, the primer is going to hook on it, lock and key, hook up, and you know what you have. Human DNA is distinctive because of its primers. So if this guy, if the father of the Starchild or the Starchild itself had been human, you would have had a full recovery here, and you don't have one. It is not, dad was not human, meaning ipso facto the Starchild is not human. The Starchild is a hybrid between a human mother and a non-human father. This was in 2003. We did this in the summer of 2003. We knew then what we had. But when you try to say to anybody, well, okay, we've got this, we've got proof. We've got proof. What they say to you is, no, you don't. All you have is an indication that something has gone wrong with your DNA recovery process, that the primer just didn't work. But that doesn't make him an alien. It just makes him weird. It doesn't make him an alien. It just makes him weird, different. You can't say that he's an alien. Not scientifically. We do not allow that. I mean, I can say it, but I can't. They don't pay attention. Do you see what I mean? So I'm stuck. But the geneticists, Jason and them, they said, you know, we're working really hard in our field to recover the whole genome package because science wants to recover the Neanderthal DNA. So you can't recover Neanderthal any easier than you can recover the Starchild because you don't know what you're looking for. You don't know how to make a combination of primers for a Neanderthal. So what you have to do to get a Neanderthal chromosomal package or its genome is you have to recover every bit of it. All 3 billion base pairs, or however many base pairs it is. You have to develop a technique to recover base pair by base pair. And they said they're working on it. It's going to happen in the next 3 to 5 years. You're just going to have to wait. Well, sure enough, almost 3 years to the month. 454 Life Sciences in Connecticut announced that they could do it, and they were going to do it, and they were starting on the Neanderthal. And it was going to take about 2 years because, again, 3 billion base pairs, I mean, it's an awful lot. But it can be done. It is being done. And it can be done to the Starchild, too. We just need the money to pay for it. It's an expensive process. Started out at $500,000 for the Neanderthal, but it's going to drop down, and it is dropping down. It'll be under 100,000 maybe by next year. We've always planned to do it in 209, 210, somewhere in there, when we feel like people will support it. Of course, Steven Spielberg could pay for it tomorrow, or anybody with deep pockets, but nobody seems nobody wants this answer. The truth of it is, nobody wants this answer because of what it's going to mean. You all sit here and you come to these meetings and you want it to be true, but if I put the power in your hand, I said, you turn this button and tomorrow it's absolutely proven. Would you really want to do that? Yes. You say that, but a lot of people in this field do not really when they come right down to it, because we have not been really rigorously supported by many of the top names in the field that should have supported it. Everybody wants it to happen on somebody else's watch. That's what it comes down to. Everybody wants it to happen on somebody else's watch. Anyway, so that's the story of where we are. We're pretty much just waiting now for time to pass so that we can afford it out of our own pockets, because nobody's going to do it for us. Basically it. But the time will come. I'm telling you, folks, this is going to happen. This is the real deal. This is the one. And that's why I urge you to get a copy of the book if you can. And if I run out here tonight, email me and order one. You should. Try to have one, because they're going to be worth something in the future. This is going to happen. This is the real deal. Okay. Now, I'm just going to kind of go through these. This is when we cut the bone. There's some more interesting stuff to go. But the DNA is really the big deal, but there's more to go. More really interesting things. This is when the bone was first cut. It just shows you the powder of the Dremel blade blowing into the cancellous holes of the bone. This is what was found. See these things here? The little fibers sticking out. Never seen before in bone of any kind. This was under a scanning electron microscope. They went nuts. What is that? What is that? Look at the close-up. Look at this stuff. This was in this track here, and it got pulled up somehow here and got all this stuff wrapped around it. I don't even know. This was in this close-up, and this close-up here. You can see the knot right here. We call it the knot. That's it right there, here. And then these little strings here are here. They're different. They're in the bone. They are part of the bone. They're in the matrix of the bone, and we don't know what it is. But we do know one thing. They are durable. And remember that business about cutting this bone, how hard it was? If they resisted a Dremel blade, they are durable. Okay, this is, you can see this, the cut was smooth through here, and they kind of let up on the powder. You know, you let up on the juice a little bit, you're coming to the end of the cut, and you got this right here, and this, so this became what we call the claw. See the claw right here, and you see these fibers connecting to it. We're going to see some even more close-ups now. Oh, nuts. Good thing I know this by heart. And this is the claw again. Look at the fibers, and you see these little particles of, that's just bone chip, just bone powder created by the blade. And this is the button. It's going to hang up here. You see the button here, button here, button here. Coming up, and you see more of it here, and you see a flare from another one coming up here. This is that button again thing, the flange fiber, base of it, fiber. These fibers are weird because they're not the same. We don't know what they are. Now, the first thing you think of was, well, maybe they grew there. Maybe they're like bacteria or something, or a fungus or a mold or something. We took it to mycologists in England right away, first thing, and we had 4 of them go over it, and they all said, I don't think so. We need an expensive test called a Maldi-Toff test to be 100% sure, but they said, well, we've never seen anything like this. And the stuff grows on the bone. It doesn't grow in channels in the bone. So this is it's almost certain that it's just a fiber, part matrix of the bone. And remember I said that everything has an Inian. Well, nothing has that. Nothing has that. The Starchild stands alone. So that, you would think that would have scientists jumping up and down, wouldn't you? But it doesn't. They just, it's got to be a fluke. It's got to be a freak. Don't bother me with it. You can't imagine how frustrating this is to know what this is and not be able to get people to pay attention to it. There we go. This is one we just call the staple because it's just all kind of, it looks like a staple and it just was off on its own. It got detached, but it's snagged on the bone here. But this very clearly shows the shearing that the blade did on it to show you how resistant it is, how durable those fibers are. A Dremel blade would cut your finger off like it was butter. These fibers are tough. Okay, now this is a completely different cut. This is later when we were going to do it for different testing, and the guy said, do it with a diamond blade instead of a standard Dremel blade. Do it with a diamond-coated blade to get a better, cleaner cut. And it did, and there were no fiber. We never found any fibers on these. A diamond blade is a really tough Dremel blade, and it really, because the bone was so hard to cut, he said, just get a diamond blade and it'll be a lot easier. And it was. It was still hard, but it went through easier than before. I was there for both cuttings. But the important part here is that you see that you get a different look at it. You get more powder from the Starchild. You get a little less here. It's a much cleaner cut. And you see the layering here, and this looks sort of like poured concrete. This is human bone. This is Starchild bone. So maybe this has something to do with the strength of it. Certainly, there's more collagen in here. There's no doubt about that. But this is really neat. I like this. What they did was, instead of cutting some parts of the bone, they took pliers and they chipped off pieces. These are really small pieces, no bigger than your fingernail. And he chipped off a piece, and they took it in lapidary tools, that you use to polish gemstones, very slow, very patient, creating no powder whatsoever. Polishing it. That's human bone. It's so, relatively speaking, it's so big you can't get it on one slide, but see how it looks. It's beautiful. It's like alabaster. That's the inside surface of the skull, of the human skull. It's just accretion, basically, nothing important to it. But look at how neat and cool that is, and see how clean the holes are. Those are the cancellous holes between your bones. Now, it's important to explain this. You have the cortical layer, outer and inner. It's kind of like a sandwich, and inside you have the cancellous holes. When you die, Mother Nature has designed it so that you carry within you the microbes that are going to consume you and take you away and turn you back dust to dust. When that happens, those things clean out the marrow of your bones completely. And as you see, you can eat off of that. It's so clean. That is the way it works. Those microbes clean you out. In other words, if Mother Nature didn't clean her own plate, we'd go out of here and there'd be 1,000-foot-high piles of bones all around. Everything is consumed in this way when it dies. That's how nature works. So, but if you die like in certain circumstances, like out in a desert or something, which is not a normal environment for you, then your bones can be bleached white and stay there for a very long time. But most of you will be gone. That's the way it works even in the desert. But in the normal course of events, even your bones go down to nothing. Mold and bacteria will consume your bones. But this is how it works normally. Clean, clean, clean. The Starchild polished. Look at the difference. And notice, see the creamy color, not alabaster looking at all. That's all that extra collagen in there. But look at this little speckle here, this little spot. That was kind of an oddity, that little red spot. The beginning, the start of more things to come. Dadgummit. I'm sorry, I'm so inept with this. This is the other side of that bone you just saw. You see more speckles of it. 1 millimeter here. Even more. Look how much. And this, that's just a blow up of that area. And this is a backlit area. Look how much is in there. It's red, you notice. Now, you also should notice that marrow, when you die, or when you spill blood, it turns black as soon as it oxidizes, right? This, whatever it is, it shouldn't be red, but it shouldn't be anything in there. This is as much a puzzle as the fibers. We do not know what this is. This is another thing that nothing has in death, particularly not 900 years after the fact. Two great mysteries, the fibers and the red residue. Okay, now this is just showing the damage that's been done to the skulls for the testing. This is the human, this is the Starchild, a repaired cut, but it just shows you why I don't bring them out anymore. They're not really that. We did for the first time since late '99, since the first cut was made, we had them out in public at the Roswell 60th anniversary last year. First time in those years. Don't do it very often. This is the copy that you're going to see here and the original. So you see how close it is, how well done it is. Now, this is interesting. What is the Starchild? Well, a guy named David Chase in Seattle wrote a book, and this is back in 98, 99, somewhere in there, I think. And he got everybody that he could that would tell him they had seen an alien. Well, what did you see? Tell me. And he found that there was a pattern. And they saw one of various types, the short gray, the tall gray, the hybrid. We think the Starchild might have been one of these, the little bitty gray, the blue man. This is the rarest kind. They look like little fire plugs or something. Then you have the reptilian, which he put in a robe. And then you have the Lyrans, Pleiadians, Anunnaki, whatever you want to call the ones that look human. And there should be an insect looking one here, an insectoid. And I said that to him. I said, David, why'd you put the reptile in the robe and leave the insect out entirely? He said, man, I didn't want to scare people off with the cover, you know. And I said, well, okay, good idea, basically, yeah. So anyway, if you thumb through the book, and I actually have a copy with me, you can see the clusterings and the groupings of them. But this is what we think maybe the Starchild might be, as one of those hybrid gray types. It's a hybrid between these kind and this kind, which, you know, makes sense. All right, this is an interesting story. Josie Galante, a woman, an artist in Taos, New Mexico, claimed that she had been abducted, made pregnant, and they came and got her fetus in the 4th month, as they always do. And then 5 years later, she was taken back on board and told, this is your child, spend time, bond with it. This is a very common story. You should know this. This shouldn't be a shock to any of you. This is a very common story in the field of UFO. Women being abducted, being made pregnant, having the fetus taken out of them, and then being able to see it some years later, whatever. For her, it was 5 years. And so she did this in '96. The Starchild didn't come into my possession until '99. She had no way to know what it looked like when she drew. She, again, being an artist, she drew what she remembered of her son. Quite a coincidence. Doggone it. There we go. Profile shot. Look at this. Put the skull in there. Now, what are the odds 3 years before the Starchild has ever sees the light of day that she could nail it like that? What are the odds? Now, here's one that's even more shocking. 1978, a guy is abducted, and he hires a sculptor to work till he gets it the way he wants it. He said, this is what I saw. These are the guys that were doing me. 78, mind you. Look at that comparison. Pretty cool, huh? What are the odds of this being just coincidence? Now, these are some drawings of people who, artist conceptions, have tried to get it. This is, I think we've all seen that face on some really hard Sunday mornings. The hangover look, but, and this is Katie Lin. She was a Chinese girl, so she gave it kind of a oriental look. But one thing about the eyes is you saw the way they were positioned. If the eyes are like we have eyes, they're down here in the middle of the nose because of the way everything was moved down. So it's going to take a much bigger lid to blink if it blinks like we have, if we blink like we blink. So that's what they're trying to deal with, that issue. This is a guy named Mark Savy did this, which I thought was pretty good. I think the chin is way too big. He didn't put the dent in, but you know, not too bad. Not too bad. One of the better early drawings. This is a guy named Rob Roy Menzies in Alaska, and this is what he came up with by taking this image and just, you know, putting a face on it. I got this and I said, God, can you make him look a little less grumpy? So he kind of smoothed the mouth out a little bit. But at least he got the crease right and fixed the eyes, and don't know about the nose. But, you know, I think that this is reasonable. Now, this is really interesting, the communion versus the Starchild. Bud Hopkins revealed this, I don't know why, in a I think it was a MUFON newsletter not too long ago, but maybe 2 years ago. But what he said was this: the Whitley Strieber book, the image on the Whitley Strieber cover, which is not this because that artist does not let it be used for anything, so this is, Rob Roy did this as just a copy of it, but you see that it's the cover, you know, it's that look of that image. It was just done by a cover artist in New York. It wasn't like what a gray looks like. It wasn't like what Whitley said. Everybody agreed it was a great image and it was going to sell books, but it wasn't a gray. But it is the iconic image of a gray because of that book. It is the iconic image of a gray because of that book, but it looks nothing like a gray. This looks like a gray. And so what Bud Hopkins said is that when they go to interview somebody who claims to have had an experience, they will show them this picture first thing. Say, does this look like what you saw? And if they say, oh, yeah, that's what I saw, he knows right away they're lying. But if somebody says, no, that's not what I saw, it was different from that, well, then they know they're dealing with somebody that has had a real experience probably. And he announced that in this article. I was blown away because what he said was what they really look like is this. They should be showing this. Did you see something like this? It looked just like the Starchild. I think that's cool. Okay, now this is the 454 Life Sciences thing that I was telling you about. And you can read it if you want, but I've already told you the story. They have developed a technique for recovering base pair by base pair, all 3 billion base pairs. It takes about 2 years now, but as their technology proliferates and as they get more and more machines out there, they're going to be able to do it quicker, do it more efficiently, and the cost is going to go down. That's why I'm saying the cost is coming down all the time. By next year, sometime, by 2010 at the latest, I would say we'll be able to pay for it and get it done. Again, we could start tomorrow if we had a lot of money, but probably be 100 grand or more to do it now. And we just, you know, there's no way that isn't going to happen. But it's there, folks. It's there, and that's what counts. It's going to happen. So let me wrap it up with the book. And I was only able to bring 30 copies to this trip. And there's, you know, you guys, and then there's the one tomorrow night in Orange County. So let me urge you all, if you can, and please, if you can, pay cash or check. I have a credit card machine back there, but the post office box, the address on it, is closing at the end of this month, and I don't want to have any credit cards if I can avoid it, because I don't know how that's actually going to work. Otherwise, it'd be fine. Credit cards would be fine. But if you can do cash or a check, if you want to get it, please do that. But I urge you, even if you don't do it tonight, try to get a copy of this book. one of these last 500 copies, because it's going to be worth something down the line. There are only going to be 2,000 of them. This is going to happen. That book will be worth money to you.
Thank you, Lloyd, for coming.
Thank you.